Alrighty, welcome to Level 2 Specialist of our Bootcamp adventure. Today we are going to be learning about solving two-step equations. I would make sure that you have your goal sheet out so you can write the goal down for this section. It is to solve two-step equations in one variable. If you slide down, you'll see that we have a little question here for your APK. Go ahead and answer that. Next, we're going to move on to vocabulary. So as you see, we have inverse operations, which if you remember correctly, we wrote down on your vocabulary sheet last time. So you won't have to write this one down, but just as a reminder, it is a mathematical operation that can undo itself. Okay? Again, if you have any questions on vocabulary, please make sure that you are asking us. So now we're going to get into the procedure part of this section. So once again, this section is solving two-step equations. As you can see underneath the title, we do have a cute little brain pop video that you can watch about solving two-step equations. It's not necessary that you watch it, but if you want to, awesome. So our first step is to locate the variable and start by working on that side. So just like previously before, you want to always make sure that you write down the equation that you are given, so that then you can make sure that you know where you're going, where your starting point is, and how you're trying to get to your ending point. So let's just say we start off with 2x plus 4 equals 10. Now when we see this equation and we're looking for the variable, we can see that it's on the left-hand side, right there, but there's something attached to it. So this is going to be a little bit different than solving one-step equations, because we're going to have a surprise, an extra step that we're going to have to do, making this a two-step equation. So our next step is to eliminate what is not attached to the variable by adding the opposite value. And you must do this to both sides of the equation. So the one thing that we do have attached to the x currently is the 2. So with step number 2, what we're going to do is get rid of or eliminate what is not attached. So the only thing that's not attached right now to this 2, or to this 2x, or to the x, is 4. So what we're going to do is we're going to add the opposite, which would be adding a negative 4, and we're going to make sure we do that to both sides. So we're going to end up with 2x equals 10 plus negative 4, which is 6. So from here, you're going to go on to step 3. So now you're going to eliminate what is attached to the variable by performing the opposite operation, which would be multiplication or division, which we did in level 1. So you must do this on both sides of the equation, no matter what. What you do to one side, you always are going to do to the other. So to get rid of that 2, which is attached to the x, you're going to divide by 2. And you're going to do that on both sides. So now you're going to come up with x equals 6 divided by 2, which is 3. If we move on down to step 4, we have to make sure that the variable is by itself on one side of the equation. From here, we need to make sure that the variable is positive and the answer is written in the lowest form. So we're going to go on now to a couple examples. As you can see, there's actually a step 5. And with that one, again, you're going to check your answers. Like I said before in the last video, you always want to make sure you're doing this with the equations. This is the only time that you're really going to be able to plug in the answer that you got to make sure that you got a correct answer. Alrighty, so here are our first examples. We're going to start with the one that says 9x minus 17 equals negative 62. So following step 1, we have to get rid of what is not attached to the x. So the one thing that's not attached would be that negative 17. So in order to get rid of it, we have to add by the opposite. So what that will look like is 9x minus 17 plus 17 equals negative 62 plus 17. This is going to sound very, very repetitive, but what you do to one side, you have to do to the other. So from there, that's going to cancel out the negative 17 and positive 17. and that'll leave you with 9x equals negative 45. So if we go to the next step, which would be step 3, we have to get rid of what is attached to the x or the variable. So to do that, in order to get rid of that 9, we're going to need to divide by 9. And when we divide by that 9, we have to divide both sides by it. We're going to get x equals negative 45 divided by 9, and negative 45 divided by 9 is negative 5. So if we were to go and replace that and to check our answer, we would just go 9, and then where the x is, put in negative 5 minus 17 equals negative 62. And now 9 times 5 is 45, but we have a negative, so it would be negative 45. And remember, subtracting is just adding the opposite, which equals negative 62. And negative 45 plus negative 17 equals negative 62. And does negative 62 equal negative 62? Yes, it does. So now we're going to go on to our next example, which is s over 12, or s divided by 12 minus 9 equals negative 11. So just like before, we have to get rid of what is attached to this number, to this variable. So the one thing that we don't have attached would be the negative 9. So in order to get rid of that, we're going to have to add by the opposite. So if we have negative 9, to get rid of that, we're going to have to add 9. And we're going to add 9 to both sides. So we're going to be left with s over 12 equals negative 2. So from here, to get rid of the thing attached to the variable, which is the 12, we're going to have to multiply both sides by 12. When we do that, we're going to get s alone, and we're going to have s equals negative 2 times 12. And negative 2 times 12 is negative 24. And just like previously, if we want to go ahead and put that answer back into our original equation, we can to check our answer. So if we were to do that, we'd have negative 24 over 12 minus 9 equals negative 11. And if we're following the order of operations, we'd have to do division first. So negative 24 divided by 12 is going to give us negative 2. From there, we'll have negative 2 minus 9 equals negative 11. And remember, subtraction is just adding the opposite. So you'd have negative 2 plus negative 9 equals negative 11. So we're going to move on to our last example, which is a little bit different than what we've been working with. So this one says 8 more than 5 times a number is negative 62. So remember from our previous chapter that when we were doing this, there's a few things that we need to remember. So when we see more than, what are we doing with this? There's adding involved. And then when we see is, that means that it's going to be equal. So we have 8 more than 5 times a number is negative 62. So 5 times a number. So when I hear 5 times a number, I think of 5 times a number which could be any variable. So I'm going to say n. So I'm going to write this out as an equation for us. So what is that going to look like? It's going to be 5x, or 5n, plus 8 equals negative 62. And just like the rest of the steps in this video, what we're going to do is we need to get rid of the thing that is not attached to the variable. So in order to do that, we have to add by the opposite. So we're going to, since we have a positive 8, we're going to add negative 8. So we're going to add negative 8 to both sides. And we're going to be left with 5x equals negative 70, because negative 62 plus negative 8 is negative 70. From here, we have to get rid of what is attached to that x, and we're going to divide by 5. When we divide negative 70 by 5, we end up with negative 14. As you can see, we have our questions right here. We're going to go through these as a class, and if you scroll all the way to the bottom, you will see that we have the final G question that you're going to want to answer on your goal sheet. And then from here, you can go ahead and look at your activity options. We have 3 different ones. There's the color worksheet, the card game, or the maze activity.